Hi man, welcome back. As I promised, I wanted to walk you through this projection. It's very straightforward. You know, it's just tweaking on so that the projection matches as good as possible. That's basically it. Everything else is just everybody can do it. Okay, but let's just dive right into it. This is a composition, and you can see I have these vertical strange things in here. And if you have watched Lebach's Ring, my big tutorial that I really advise you to watch because there's so much stuff in there. If you watch that tutorial, then you know what this is. You know that I like to separate my composition into different sections. And that is because I want to keep my composition, my flow, as organized as possible. You know, I think the main point of node-based workflow is efficiency. Efficiency. And why you think that efficiency is absolutely necessary or important? Now, for me, efficiency is one way to keep you as long as possible in what I call the creative flow. You know, I mean, every artist knows that you once at some point you reach this moment where you're just creating without thinking. You're not thinking anymore. You're just creating. It just flows out of you. Art is about your personality. It's all about you. It's not about other people. It's not about all the doctrines and all the stuff that you've learned from other people or from books or from tutorials or whatever. It's about your personality, you know. So it means everything has to come naturally out of you. And that happens only if you get into that flow. The moment you think, you're not in the flow anymore. For example, problem solving time, when you have to solve problems, you know, technical problems, that's not a creative flow anymore. That's just problem solving. I mean, yeah, it's also necessary, you know, but that is why it's essential. It's essential to keep your flow very nice and clean. And I've seen people doing some crazy action in there. It's like Spider-Man went crazy, and you know, Spider-Man went drunk and crazy and doing some crazy spider web in there. So you basically, I once had this project where I had to take over a comp file from another guy who couldn't make it because schedule was too tight. So I had to continue with his stuff, and I was like, oh my god. I just didn't find anything, you know. I had to ask him, hey, what did you do here? Why is this node here? And where is this going? Why is it going there? And, you know, I just needed to keep asking him. It was like crazy, you know. So, yeah. And just to give you a very quick explanation about these sections. So usually I would start with the loader section. That's where I bring everything in that I need, all the footage, all this, I don't know, mainly footage or 3D objects. And this is because I want to know whenever I want to grab a map, texture or whatever to use it somewhere, I want to know that it's in the loader section. I don't want to search through my comp, you know. I just want to go back to the loader section. It's just where I pick all the stuff out that I need and just bring it to the place that I need it. That's how it's usually done, right? You always have a storage somewhere, and when you need something, you go in and you get it. And okay, and this next section would be the technical section, where you do stuff like preparation for further processing, and then you would have the comp section where you actually composite, and then that will go to the post section. That's where you do some post effects, soft glow, whatever. But that's, of course, that's not a rule or something. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to follow this all the time, like 100%. Of course, I don't do that. You know, sometimes I swoop in a soft glow right in the technical section. You know, it doesn't make sense, but as soon as it looks right at the end, who can say that it's not right what you're doing? Nobody can say that. You can do whatever you heck want, man. It's all about you. With that said, I would say let's just walk you through this composition.
I know that they watching me, trying to figure me out. Like, what's my life like? Am I committed, devout? Perception is relying on what you trained your sight like. So what you see is whatever gets permitted by your eyes, right?
Okay, so as I said, here is the loader. This is the image that I downloaded from the internet. I cannot share this with you. You have to download it by yourself. I don't have the rights to, share it with you. Okay, so but you can download it and use it for yourself for practice. And I put the link in the description. Okay, so what I did with this image here, now usually I like to expose it, you know, I didn't do it this time. As I said, sometimes it depends on the composition, but usually I like to expose what I do to these things, because when I load this composition like 2 months later, you know, because I want to do something, it's good to have this stuff exposed, that you know exactly what you did here. You know, what I did in the loader node is in the import tab, I changed it to float 16. But I actually, if I have more loaders and they have a more complex composition, then I would use a change node and I would change it to float 16 here. In this case, I didn't use a LUT or a gamut. Usually you would put this into a linear space by using a gamut after the change. You know, you would change it here. But if you watch Box Ring, then you know what I'm talking about. But for now, this is just about the camera projection, right? So this is what it usually would look like, but you don't have to. It all depends on what you're doing, man. Yeah, I fed this into a wireless node, okay? And what I did then is, obviously I brought this wireless node over here. You can see those 3 nodes are it's all this image here. And the reason why I left the original wireless node here is because, as I said before, this is like our storage. This is where all the stuff is located. And the thing is, if I would take the original node, the original wireless node, and I would bring it over, and then I would copy and paste it somewhere else and many times, you know. And let's say I'm here and I say, okay, I want to have this wireless node again. So you would have to go through your comp and you would have to search for it. And that will obviously take time, which is, again, one thing that takes you out of the creative flow. You don't want that. You know, that's why I like to leave it the original one. I like to leave it at its origin. Because then, you know, if you have a huge composition and you say, okay, I want to have this image, you can just swoop over, swing over, not swoop, swing or swoop, I'm not sure. You can just swing over and just quickly grab this node and swing back. So easy. Okay, and especially if you have many images, or, you know, masks, for example, when you have a huge project. For example, the last project I did, we had a lot of masks for the whole environment. Every little piece, every little object had a mask, and it was all put into wireless nodes, and it was all stored in one special section. So every time I needed the mask, and I needed them a lot, I had to go back. I could go back to the mask section, and I was good to go. You know, very nice and clean. Okay, so what I did, I brought it over to this sort of technical section, or the prep section. It's where I prepare it for the projection swag. And so I brought it over here. Remember, wireless nodes have to be an instance, otherwise you will lose the connection. And I cached it. I don't know why it takes so long. What I did in this line here, I changed it to something like this. You can see I extended the pavement and I added a shadow here. Okay, so this is the layer for the pavement. This is what we get. And how I did this is actually interesting. So many people out there, especially the new ones who are new to Fusion, I saw a few comments on the internet like complaining about the grid tool. Like, oh, hey, what the hell is this crap? Yeah, if you don't know how to use the tool, then it's crap. But if you know how to use it, then it's doing magic for you. Magic. You cannot think of the grid tool as like the warp tool of Photoshop, where you just have an image and you just warp it. Of course, you can do similar, you can do some sort of warping, but the grid warp needs a different usage, or has a different usage purpose. Let me rephrase it. The grid warp has a different purpose, okay? And if I view the first grid warp, see what happens. Now you might think, what the heck happened there? Hey. Now, what I did here is sort of an unwrap, because it's easier to have, if I show you this image here, to extend this curved pavement is much more difficult to do. It would be much easier if it's straight, because then you can use the clone tool and you can just stamp clone, or what's it called, you know. It's much easier. And that's what I basically did here. Okay, I sort of unwrapped. Yeah, you can think of it as an unwrap. And then I cloned the pavement. Now, this is very rough, okay? I'm not doing some retouch artistic here. Magic, whatever. And then I painted in the shadows. And then I warped it back. And the way that is done is just awesome. Okay, the way it's done, let me show you. Put in a grid warp, and I hook this in. So first you want to decide what you want to do with this warp, what you want to warp, what you want to unwrap. And for here, since this is the pavement layer, I wanted the pavement to be straight. So first we switch to select, so that we can select all the points, and we need to reduce the grid size, or the resolution of the grid, to a good amount, to an appropriate amount. And then you see, if I would move the grid, it would warp it. And that's what some people, or many people new to Fusion, don't know. Here you have destination and you have source. If we go to the source, you can see that we have a different grid. So you have two individual grids here. Okay. Now I've set the resolution here, and it doesn't matter. I could have set it here, you know, and then I would have, for example, if I'm in destination and I set the grid, then I would copy the destination to source, and now I have the same grid in the source. Now, the important thing to know is that the source is basically where you set your base grid, how your base grid looks like. So here, for example, we set the grid to match our pavement. And you want to try to also match the perspective. And then we set all these to linear, Shift L. So in the source, you really set the base grid, how the original grid looks like, sort of like this. Then, if you move to the destination, I mean, obviously it's not perfect, but you saw that it does the job here. I mean, it's not even the same now. I just demonstrated it now. But you can see, since this grid, the grid in the destination is left to its default. It's still straight. And what the grid tool does now is it just warps from this state, warps the image to this state. And therefore, it kind of straightens it out. Of course, you would have to tweak this much better, you know, just to get the proper result. Okay, and with the flattened, or with the unwrapped image, I would then use the clone stamp tool to copy the pavement's texture. Then I would paint in the texture, the shadow, excuse me. And yeah, and the magic happens now that when I use this grid tool, it moves back to its original state with the changed texture, or with the extended pavement. And the way I did this is also very simple. Now let's say we have this grid and I copied over. So what this grid here is basically reversing what we did before. So the grid we have in the source this time gets into the destination, and the one that we have in the destination we put into the source, and therefore we reverse the effect. Okay, but the question is, how do you actually get the grid from the source of this into the destination of this? select the grid, Control C, go to the next grid, warp, into the destination, select all, Control V, and you're done. This thing is reversed. Now, at some point, you can see here there are still some problems, but this is all stuff that you can somehow fix. I mean, I'm not quite sure what I did here. Actually, I had the same, but it just doesn't show because it's the pavement anyway. So, okay, but that's how I did the grid warp. And if you didn't know how to use the grid warp, that's how you use it. Or that's one way to use it. And it's very powerful. I mean, it's really powerful. Because in this bended state, you know, it's really difficult to do things. So it would be good to make it straight first and then do your work. It's much easier then. And the grid warp is the way to go. I know I like the grid warp. Can't stop talking about the grid warp. And yeah, so here I basically just overlaid this over the rest, and you see that all problems disappeared. And we went from this to this. Now there's a lot of difference in here, but we don't care about this because it's the pavement layer anyway. And then on beneath that, we have a new layer, and this is going to be the car layer. Okay, and we are going from this to this. Now basically what I did here is just to cut out and the rear lights, the back lights. And what I did here is I quickly rotoscoped the car, something like this. Then I put this into a mask and another mask to, yeah, here I just wanted to get the lights as much as possible, and all the rest would be excluded using another poly mask, and we would end up with this here. And then I used this rasterize plugin, very quick and dirty, from on the Crocodile tools. Unfortunately, only works in the studio version, and I used it to sort of rasterize it and get these dots going on here. And another line here just darkens what we have here. And then I merge these on top of it, just very quick and dirty. And what I have here, light gain sin, and this is basically just a quick animation. And I use a very simple expression here to sort of get this animation going on here. And important with this was that here the very high, very bright areas are super bright. Okay, so let me activate the color inspector. Now, if you check the values, you can see that here we have a value of red 77. That's pretty high. That is important for the soft glow, because the soft glow, if you have those those very bright highlights, not only the soft glow, but the motion blur, all those things that, you know, all those effects look much more natural and much cooler, you know, than if you have just a very flat image. And yeah, then I put this back, and we get something like this. And yeah, by the way, these also go into a wireless node. Just freezing at the moment. Freezing. Yeah. And let's go to the third layer. The third layer is, I guess it was the wall out, yes. So here it's the wall, and I did the same thing that I did with the pavement. First, I straightened it out using the grid warp. You see? The same thing here. Go into source. I roughly aligned the grid to the perspective of the wall, and then I went to the destination, and it gets stretched out. Now I pulled this up a little bit to fix a few issues, and and then I painted in very quick and dirty. Seriously, very quick and dirty. I mean, although I don't like Adobe products, I gotta admit I don't like Adobe products. You might be better off doing this kind of work in Adobe, in Photoshop. It's just made for this stuff. Can't help it. But yeah, the way their licensing works is just a rip-off, in my opinion. But yeah, that's just my opinion. And here again, I warp it back. And now warping back, you can see that we have this issue here, which is again no problem, since we can simply, yeah, you can see it's here. I cut it off using this mask. And the way I do this, I use the brightest contrast, and I just check alpha as well and bring this all the way down to 0, and this just removes everything. You can also use the Boolean tool and set it to clear using a mask, but maybe this is the fastest. And then I merge this on top of the original, and again, good to go. And then I have this, and I cut out everything except the wall. And yeah, these were the 3 preps that I did. And I brought this over, and now this is where it gets interesting. Now that's probably the most complex part of this project. The projection. Okay, if I show you the projection looks like this. Okay, here we go, nice and smooth. Okay, so how did I create this object? So first I had this plane, single plane. The plane has to have, in the best case, it has to have the same resolution as the image you use to displace it. So, and I started with this here. Now what I have here is a mask. But the cool thing about the mask tool is that you can use this here. This is a make a double poly function option, whatever. And this allows you, let me just switch this in here. So if I would draw in the mask and then you choose double, and now if you move it like this, nothing happened, right? But if you hit Control and then you pull outwards, you get this. And this is perfect. This is perfect for displacing, okay? Because it sort of looks like a Z depth. Now you can, for several effects, you can just you can move this outwards or inwards. The thing is, when you move the main point is this one here, not the one that has these dotted lines. Then this point here will follow it. This is the child or something, you know. So you can move individually. You can only move this dotted line thing. Again, now you see that this outline thing, I don't find it very useful for other stuff, to be honest. For normal masking, it's just painful to use, you know. But for this displacing thing, or for some sort of, you know, some effect stuff, it's actually quite interesting. Okay, and so this is how I started with the car displacing. And let me just turn this, let me turn this off and this off. And the way this looked was this. This is what I had first. And the thing is, I didn't like it. I didn't like the controlness of it. It was too limited, you know. Now, in Fusion, we don't have modeling tools, you know, so how can we control the geometry a little bit better? You can still use the Displacement 3D. In order to have better control, you need to switch to RGB. And what RGB does, it allows you to displace in all directions, while the Luma or the grayscale displacement mode only displays into the normal directions. Hence, you're using a grayscale map. But using RGB allows you to use colors for X, Y, Z. Okay, so where R, red, will displace X on the X axis. The green will displace on the Y axis, so up and down. And the blue will basically push in and out towards camera or away from the camera. And when I decided to do that, what I did is I used a gradient map, something like this. And then I just multiplied it on top of the existing car mask. And what that gives you, I just see a spider here. Damn it. Yeah, insects in Japan is crazy. Now let's just compare the RGB and the Luma. Of course, now because I merged this on top, but you can see there's a slight difference. But to show you this a little bit more clearly is if I go into this blue gradient and I would, let me say, add 2 new points. And this point I put to red. Now let's not bring this completely down. So you can see that by making this red, it moves it along the x-axis. Okay, and here we're gonna add green and it moves it up or down. Now this is awesome. It gives you so much control. You have to keep one thing in mind. This needs at least 16-bit float. You know why? Let me just get rid of these. Let's put this in here. Now you can see that here in the middle, I put the blue down to 0. And you can see that the displacement, basically, the displace effect, it basically disappears. If you want to go negative, you need float. And what that allows you is to go inward. Pretty awesome, seriously. So keep in mind, displacement maps, anyway, usually need 32-bit float. Okay, but let's go back on track. Let's get back on track. Yeah, my English sometimes. Okay, and what I did next is I used this gradient here, blurred it a little bit, and put it on top of this. And this is basically for this area here. And that's the most trickiest part, because it's, you know, it's not a very nice angled geometry. It's just like very organic, and it's kind of difficult to do. And yeah, and the blur, basically what the blur does, if you have wondered, is if I turn this off, you can see that the blur nicely blends these together. I mean, check this out. It really blends it nicely together. Okay, and then we displace this thing and we get something awkward, something weird looking like this. And as I said, this area here was difficult. And that's what I meant with tweaking until it looks right. And then I went to the projection. And of course, for that, we need the replace material. And this is how it looks. Now, of course, it works only to a certain angle. Then it would break down, but that's how it is with projections. What I have here is basically two transform nodes. They're just transforming. And this is an instance of each of these. And this is just to move the whole thing, the car with the projection camera at once, you know, just to adjust the height a little bit. That's basically it. Next, the wall. Now, wall also very simple. Right into a camera, which then automatically becomes a projection camera. And you want to make sure, if you work with more than one camera, one projection camera, you want to make sure that you use the IDs, project IDs, to avoid, like, you know, some, yeah, you know, one camera interfering with another, you know, and causing problems. And here the same, I started with a plane, and then I replaced the material with a catcher. I used displace, and for the displace, now this looks like it's black, but it's not. The thing is what I was talking about. Here you can see I have a blue value of -1. And what this does, as soon as I bring in my projection camera, now this is a very good example on why to use the RGB mode displace. Now what I did here is I angled the wall using this this negative value. Now, if I would make 1, it goes forward. -1. Oops, that was the alpha. -1, it angles it backwards. That's pretty damn cool. And yeah, that is basically it. And then I brought them together. It looks somewhat like this. And you know, you see it already starts to get some cool effect here. And the next layer. The next layer is the pavement. Again, I used a mask to cut out the pavement area. Again, catcher and displacement. Now you can see if you hook the catcher in before you hook in the projector or the camera, you can't see it because it projects nothing. But you can see what I did here is I displaced my pavement already. And for that I used also this mask, and I displaced it. And once we view the camera, you can see we have some pretty good pavement going on here. Okay, and then we bring all together. And you can see this is already pretty good. I mean, this is very good. And now you can already play on your camera. Now, of course, as I said, at some angle it breaks down, and you would have to replace the wall here, you know, but then the car becomes too short anyway. So yeah, it doesn't work endlessly, you know. If you have the proper geometry, hi, I just was called for dinner. If you have the proper geometry, then you could use different projection angles, you know, and you could basically texture your scene using the different cameras and angles. Okay, but yeah, this was from the start, it was just meant to be a single camera projection. Okay, next, what I did next is I put in those barrels. And what you see here is that these are basically 2D, and these are real 3D objects. And they look actually pretty good in the final result. Very believable. It's just to show the reason why I did this 2D and the other 3D is just to show that how you can combine everything. You know? So this was for the foreground in out of focus, so this didn't matter anyway. But here I wanted to show how you can utilize some light effects behind those barrels, and yeah, but it's just super simple really. And then we have, oh yeah, look at this. I fixed this area by putting in this image, and it's really just a simple image. If I open the group, now I have this image here. So you can still see there's an A in there, but it's whenever you look for stuff on the internet, seriously, I mean, to get some really good usable stuff is impossible unless you pay like what, $100 a month or something. Everybody, for every little image you want to download, they ask you for money. I mean, I don't understand how people can actually survive, in this industry, if paying for every little thing that is out there. I mean, yeah, whatever. So I just used this image and I cropped it down, and I just color corrected it and added some shadows, put it on an image plane, and then just placed it right into the scene here. And then we have, I think there was some, was it the third? Oh, it was this part here. Same here. Just use an image, cut it out, crop it, and put it on an image plane. And the borders you see here, this arrow here, is just a display thing. If you right click, if you right click and you set it to quick sort, it will get better. But in this case, actually quick sort was not enough. Oops, just accidentally moved something here. Ugh. Okay. If you okay, what just happened? Oh, this is great. For some reason I detached a catcher up there. I don't know how that happened. That was pure magic. Yeah, anyway, so the thing is, if with this scene just quick sort, it wasn't enough. I had to actually activate full sorted, but then this whole scene becomes super slow. So I I would just switch back and forth depending on what I needed. Important is that later on when you render this out, you switch to full sorted. And yeah, and I put some other elements in, like just exactly like these, the window and this thing here. Here a newspaper. The newspaper is a little bit interesting. Again, I started with an image from the internet. I cropped it, alpha divide to start coloring process here. Now make it darker and extract a bit from it, and use animated. I used an instance of the animated light so that it would basically go up and down with the light. So it suggests that it's from the backlight of the car. You know what I mean. And then I would put these together, alpha multiply, good to go, put it on the image plane and put it in the scene. Next would be some grass here. The grass is cool. The only thing I did is adding a shadow on the bottom, and then some dust to enhance the 3D, the depth, and some steam. Now here with the steam, you can see that the display is completely I'll just say screwed, but yeah, would you have to switch to quick sort. And lastly, the camera, and there's also a light in here. I actually don't remember why this one is off. And then I would add a fog. This fog is totally fine. You don't need a volume fog for this. In this case, this fog is probably even better because you don't have a proper world pass, and it wouldn't give you good results with a volume fog. And then I rendered this thing out. Waiting. I should go for dinner, but I'm here for you. And seriously, this still looks like crap. I mean, it's okay, especially if you see it animated. But let's move on to the post section. Now again, this put into a wireless node. By the way, what I was saying about the sorted, here in the transparency, usually it's set to Z buffer. You will have to make sure this is to quick sort or sort accurate. As I said, in my case, I needed to sword accurate. I even have depth of field on, just so you know. And so what you see here, this depth of field is true depth of field, okay? And this is the wall wash. This is for the light here. That's just an extra light that I added. And let's move to the post section. Okay, the first thing I did was a vignette. Hey. Now, usually you would do this at the end. I thought I'd just do it right now. But you can do it as you want. And then I used the Chroma views from Stefan Edinger. It's a very cool tool. Gives you the chromatic aberration. If I can toggle on and off, you can see it gives a, if used very subtle, it really enhances the natural feel of this. So if you check the number plate, it also gets rid of this little bit ugly edges a little bit. It smooths them a little bit or makes them a little bit more natural. But you have to use it subtle, otherwise this thing will blur the whole image. Then I used a soft glow and another soft glow, and now you can see that the soft glow nicely affects only the light, super bright pixels, and another one. And then I sharpened this. Now the sharpen is a little bit tricky. I mean, if you look closer, it actually destroys this. So actually I wanted to leave this off for now. And what I did then is I used a third-party grain. This is a cool grain that I found. It's actually a free version. I'm actually considering getting the full version. It's called, what was it called? Holy Grain, and it's an animated scanned film grain. And I just think it looks feels a little bit more natural than the fusion grain, but both have advantages. I put this on top, very subtle, and then I clap. This is just for clipping the blacks, and this is for clipping the highs, but soft clipping them. I did a slight soft clipping here. Here I just clipped it a little bit. And what I did next, that's the most crucial part, but this is important as a preparation before you apply the LUT, L-U-T, lookup table. Now the lookup table is usually a technical thing, but you can also use it as a creative process, as a creative thing. For example, here I applied this LUT and I changed the color to this. It's good to go. What else can I say? My name is Vito. I'll see you soon, because I'm going to dinner. Until then, enjoy what you're doing. Hey. By the way, if you want to have the project file of this comp, support me on Patreon. It's really not much. It's really not much, and you get all these project files and all this knowledge.